Today we're going to be talking about No, but in all seriousness, today we're going to be talking about JSON and how you should be using it, what it is, everything that you need to know so you can start comfortably using it in your projects. JSON, what is it exactly? JSON, or JavaScript Object Notation, is a file format standard that is language agnostic. That means any modern programming language, from JavaScript to Python to even Java, can understand and parse JSON. JSON focuses on creating human-readable data that can be stored or transmitted using the key-value pair structure. And because of this, JSON objects are typically confused with regular JavaScript objects because of the structure. But the main high-level difference between the two is that one is static while another is dynamic. I'll show you what I mean by this. This right here is JSON. JSON is always held inside files with the JSON file extension. JSON objects are restrictive in the sense that they can only support numbers, strings, booleans, arrays, objects, and the value null. The reason for this is because these data types are language agnostic. Almost all modern programming languages can handle and support these types of data. So if you're familiar with JavaScript objects, this doesn't look too foreign to you, but there are some key differences that we should highlight. So let's pull up a JavaScript object. JavaScript objects are always found in files with the JS file extension because they're language specific to JavaScript, unlike JSON that can be understood by any modern programming language. I've taken our data from our JSON object to create a new JavaScript object, and on top of that, I created two new variables, year and actionable, and assigned those values into their corresponding keys inside of our JavaScript object. So the first main difference is that JavaScript objects are typically assigned to variables inside JavaScript. So here my object is assigned to the variable name donate information. The second thing to notice is that you can handle dynamic information inside JavaScript objects. You can create variables and then assign those variables as values inside JavaScript objects. This means that you can reference any data type in JavaScript, anything from strings, numbers, objects, to even functions inside JavaScript. So when the object is being handled during runtime or while the code is getting executed, those variables that are referencing data will get resolved, and then those values will be injected directly into the object, making it fairly dynamic. The process of resolving data inside JSON, though, is impossible because of its static nature. Each value in JSON has to be explicitly defined in place. You can't reference any function or variable. JSON objects don't get processed through some sort of runtime. It's not a part of a programming language. You can think of it more like static text or PDF files. With all that being said, though, JSON and JavaScript objects aren't entirely disconnected from one another. You can use the built-in methods Json Stringify and Json parse to transform JavaScript objects to and from JSON strings. The method Json Stringify takes in an object as its first parameter and then returns the stringified version of that object. You can use this method in a case where you might want to save an object where strings are only accepted, like the Windows local storage interface. Json Stringify will ignore data types that it does not support, or even throw an error when it comes across a data type that can't be serialized or easily converted into a string. But it will support variables that do hold data from supported data types. So if you have a variable inside a JavaScript object and then you pass that object into your Json Stringify method, you'll see the references to those variables inside your string. Json Stringify takes in 3 parameters, where the second optional parameter is called replacer. Replacer is a function that modifies the stringification process. You can use this function in places where you come across a data type that isn't supported, but you want to return something regardless. So if you come across a function, you can call its toString method so you can get a stringified version of that function. The optional third parameter, space, can either be a string or a number, which will be used to replace the white space in your JavaScript object. If space is a number, that will be the number of spaces inserted between each value in your stringified object. And if space is a string, that string will replace the white spaces in your stringified object. This last parameter comes especially in handy when you're debugging in browsers. For example, you could call Json Stringify with your object, pass in null for your replacer, and then 2 for the number of white spaces that you want. By doing this, you can see a formatted version of your object rather than a really hard to read flat string. Json parse is the opposite to Json Stringify, such that it takes in a string and then returns out a JavaScript object. Json parse takes in 2 parameters, where the second parameter is optional and it's called the reviver. It's a method similar in nature to replacer, such that it can mutate the information given before it returns out the final object. JSON and JavaScript objects are often confused for very good reason. They take advantage of a key value pair and they store information, and they both have the phrase JavaScript in both of them. But it's super important to understand how they differ so you know when to use them in certain situations. So for a quick recap, JSON is a static representation of data. It doesn't go through any runtime or code execution, so what you put inside JSON is what is going to be inside that JSON object. JSON is language agnostic, meaning that modern programming languages can understand, parse, and handle JSON. JavaScript objects, on the other hand, are dynamic, such that they can handle, alter, change, update data all during runtime. The values inside JavaScript objects can change throughout that object's lifetime, and they're language specific to JavaScript, meaning that no other programming language can understand technically what a JavaScript object is. And that's it for JSON. If you learned something new, if you enjoyed the video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm also on Twitter. You can talk to me about JavaScript, or you can send me a DM so we can just chat. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.